Thank you, Debbie. Well, it might sound strange, but this is true. Though I've got glasses on, I'm actually wearing contacts. And some of you I've shared that before, though, that I wear contacts so I can see clearly at a distance, but I'm 48, and so that means that if I take these off, that I play the arm game. And so that means if you can get it out far enough where you can see it, you can't read it. And so my options either are to get some half glasses and look like Ben Franklin, or I can do what I've got, which is these are bifocals that are clear in the top and a reader in the bottom, so then I look good. And I don't have to keep taking these off and on. Anyway, but I wear contacts for distance, and I have done that for some time. And for the longest time, I had contacts that you would change once a month. And increasingly, it seems that eye doctors are starting to push where you use these daily wear contacts, where you get a new pair of contacts every single day. And long story short, what has happened is that the price of those has come down so that it really doesn't cost, when you figure about cleaning solution and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't cost anymore to use a daily contact. The nice thing is that they are so comfortable, and they're so much thinner, and the experience with those is awesome. Anyway, a few weeks ago, I had gotten up in the morning, because I take my contacts out at night, and then I'm going to get up, take a shower, put contacts in, and start the day. And I had gotten up, taken a shower, and I go to put contacts in, and I put them in my eyes. I get both of them in, and I thought, man, I'm 48. I knew I couldn't see well up close. I can't even see at a distance. I mean, everything was clear. Now everything is, this is terrible. I can't see squat. I mean, everything is so fuzzy. And so I thought, I'm going to take these contacts out. It seems like it looked better when I took the contacts out. So I took the contacts out, and then I realized, I never took the ones out from last night. And so it was like I was wearing two pairs of glasses, and I had doubled up my prescription. Some of you would look better. Anyway. I had done that, though, and I thought I was doing the right thing. But what I have done is that I have put extra burden on my eyes. I am carrying more than I should. And getting rid of that, man, it feels great. It's wonderful. Everything is clearer. Things are so much better when I get rid of this excess that I actually don't need to have. We're thinking about that as part of a new series that I'm starting today called Getting Over It. And we're going to be thinking about getting rid of some of the excess baggage that we are carrying, not simply as people, but more specifically as followers of Christ. And by excess baggage, I'm not talking about an extra pair of contacts. I'm not talking about carrying around too much weight. I'm not talking about having too much stuff in your closet. We're thinking about things that we are carrying around as people, things that we are lugging around on the inside that maybe, like me with my contacts, I thought I needed to have this, and then I discover I really don't. I really don't. In fact, what this is doing is actually weighing me down. At various points, it is likely that every person in this room has struggled with what we're going to talk about today, and that is carrying around the weight of guilt. Why is that? It's because we've all done things that we shouldn't. We've all acted in out-of-bounds ways. We have all, from a theological perspective, we know what Paul said was correct, that we have all sinned and we've come short of the glory of God, and every one of us has known the right, and we keep choosing so many times over and over and over again. We choose to do the wrong, and after having done so, we feel something about it. And what we feel is guilt. Now, how many of you, if there's a line of experiences or a line of emotions that you could get into, how many of you want to get into the guilt line? Nobody. You want to get into the fun line, the joy line, the laughter line, but you don't want to get into the guilt line, because that doesn't feel good. That's unpleasant. In fact, in many ways, how guilt is operating is like the light on your car that says low tire pressure or check engine light. I don't know about you, I hate when anything on my dashboard lights up because it's almost always some sort of bad news, isn't it? You don't know exactly what it is. You think this is going to somehow cost me. Every time that one of those indicators flash, it indicates that there's a problem. And as much as I may dislike the fact that there's an indicator that goes off, it is good to know that there's a problem. Isn't it good to know when your tire is low? Isn't it good to know when your oil pressure is low? I don't like having to discover that that's true, but I'm grateful to know that. Understand that while we may not like the experience and we may not appreciate the nature of the feeling of guilt, as people, specifically as followers of Christ, we should value that God has wired us to experience when we have done what we should not, that we experience guilt. Why? Because it functions like the indicator light on your dashboard. It tells you there is a problem. And if there's a problem, you want to know it. And if I have acted, if you have operated in out-of-bounds ways, God has wired me that I'm going to experience guilt. And there is this feeling that I have that's like this indicator light going off, check engine, something is wrong. Okay, that doesn't feel good. It tells me that I've got a problem. Here's the question, what do I do with it? Once I feel that way, once I'm experiencing that, am I just doomed to walk around with the check engine light on inside of me for the rest of my life? I've screwed up. I have failed in this relationship. I have committed this act. I have been to that website. I have said this thing. I have taken that thing. I have done whatever it is, and fill in the blank. We all have them. We all do. People around you may not know it, but God knows it. You know it. And maybe you came in here this morning, and when I talk about guilt, you're like, you're not whistling Dixie. You're singing my story. I came into this place weighed down with guilt. In fact, maybe some of you showed up here this morning because you were so weighed down with guilt and you thought maybe just by going to church, somehow that'll make it go away. We don't like that feeling. It weighs us down, and so are we doomed just to keep carrying it, just to keep lugging it. Let me answer it very simply. As a follower of Christ, the answer is no. Guilt is something that you can get rid of as excess baggage. And that's the question that we want to think about today. How do I do that? Maybe you came in here again this morning, you feel weighed down. You feel excessively burdened by the weight of the feeling of having acted in out-of-bounds ways, and it's lousy. How do I get rid of that? Look with me in your Bibles today to what the psalmist says in Psalm 103. Psalm 103, starting in verse 1. In fact, as we read this, some of you might have part of this. This serves as the basis for a praise and worship song that came out some years ago. But the psalmist says, "My soul, bless the Lord, and all that is within me, bless His holy name. My soul, bless the Lord, and do not forget all His benefits. He forgives all your iniquity. He heals all your diseases. He redeems your life from the pit. He crowns you with faithful love and compassion. He satisfies you with good things. Your youth is renewed like the eagle. The Lord executes acts of righteousness and justice for all the oppressed. He revealed His way to Moses, His deeds to the people of Israel. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in faithful love. He will not always accuse us or be angry forever. He has not dealt with us as our sins deserve or repaid us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is your faithful love towards those who fear Him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has He removed our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear Him. For He knows that we are made of, remembering that we are dust." What God used the psalmist to say here helps us even today, thousands of years later, answer that question. How do I get rid of these feelings of guilt? Maybe how do I get rid of the feelings of guilt that I've got right now? The first thing that you need to do based on what God says here is go to the right person. Go to the right person. As we said at the outset, we need to operate with this mindset that guilt is, in and of itself, not a negative thing, it is a positive thing. How it makes us feel, we don't say that feeling is positive, but its existence is positive because it indicates to us that we have a problem, that we have acted out of bounds. And when we experience that feeling, though, we say, okay, that stinks. I don't like how that feels. There's lots of things that we feel that we find unpleasant, just even physically. If you have a fever this afternoon and you're like, oh man, I feel crummy, I feel lousy. You realize, oh, let me check my temperature, I've got a fever, what are you going to do? You're going to take some medicine, you're going to take some Tylenol, some Advil, something to try to get rid of that excessive temperature. And as we feel those things that we deem unpleasant, we try to figure out ways to get rid of it, ways to try to remove that from us. And as people experience guilt, as people feel this feeling, they say it's negative, I want to get rid of it, and so they seek to try to get rid of it. Many times what they do is to have what amounts to a little more than a pep talk. And just talk to themselves and say, all right, Michael, you really screwed up. That was so dumb what you did. It was so regrettable what you did. It was so lousy, even horrible what you did. What you did was bad, but, hey, nobody's perfect. Don't beat yourself up. We're all in the same boat. We're all screw-ups, and so just do better next time. And what you need to do is forgive yourself. What you need to do is put this behind you and just forgive yourself and just commit yourself. Next time, do better. And there are plenty of self-help aids that you can find on bookshelves today that are effectively going to say that with a whole lot more words. Just what you need to do is to tell yourself, you're not that bad. You'll do better next time. And so just tell those feelings just simply to go away. But understand the feelings are there because they are indicating that there is a problem. And this problem is identified with a number of words in this psalm. He describes our behavior in verse 3 as iniquity. He refers to it as transgressions. And in verse 12, he refers to it as iniquity in verse 10. I want you to understand very clearly that sin, that iniquity, that transgressions do not occur in a vacuum. The reason that there is sin, the reason that there is iniquity, the reason that there are transgressions is because God has defined behaviors as being in bounds or out of bounds. God has defined the standard of what is right and what is wrong. And if I violate that standard, if I cross that line, then I have sinned against Him. I have committed iniquity against Him. I have transgressed against Him. My sin does not occur in a vacuum. Your sin does not occur in a vacuum. David's sin did not occur in a vacuum. None of our sin occurs in a vacuum. It occurs in relationship to the one who made us. It occurs in relationship to the one who made us and gave standards for us to operate within. And so when I have crossed those lines, when I have violated those standards, isn't it kind of strange for me to say, well, Michael, you just need to forgive yourself. Just commit yourself to doing better. You're not that bad. Don't kick yourself. Isn't that kind of strange? Why? Because ultimately it wasn't my standard, it was His. It wasn't my boundary, it was His. It wasn't my line, it was His line that I crossed. And the reason that I'm feeling guilt is because things aren't right, not between me, but between me and Him. And so if I am going to deal with the problem, I need to deal with the person. I need to deal with the one with whom I have the problem. I need to deal with the one whom I have sinned against. I need to deal with the one who I have transgressed. I need to deal with the one with whom I have committed this iniquity. I don't know, it was sometime I think in the past year, maybe the last 18 months, and I'm not sure exactly how Philip wound up with this, but between some money he'd gotten at his birthday, at Christmas, and somehow traded with us, and he had in his wallet a $100 bill. And so he keeps that down in his room, and he'd been sitting on that for a while, because it's kind of cool when you're younger, though, especially to have a $100 bill. Now it's cool just to have a 20 because we don't even carry any cash with us. But anyway, he had this $100 bill, and I don't know how long he'd been sitting on it, but he goes and looks in his wallet one day and discovers it's gone. it's gone. Now, I would be kind of frustrated if I lost $100, but I mean, if you're 13 years old, $100 is a whole lot more even. And so he's, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And so we live in a house with a lot of people, and so then begins the detective search. Somebody, because $100 bills don't just walk out of billfolds, correct? So someone has done something. Long story short, we finally determined that Peter, number 5, has been in Philip's room, and he has gone to the neighbor across the fence, Miles, who is like in first, I don't know what, he's a little bit older than Peter. Peter has given the $100 bill to Miles. I know some of you are going to start being nicer to Peter. You're like, hey there. Got anything for me? Because at that point, he's 4 years old, 5 years old. I mean, $1, $100, $1 million, what's dollars? Just paper. I bet Miles would like that. And so he takes the $100 bill out of Philip's wallet, gives it to Miles across the fence. And so Miles is pretty happy. Philip, we discover, is not very happy. He did not intend on giving Miles $100. And so, long story short, we have to deal with the mother and then like say, hey, this is what happened. And then we get the money back from Miles. And in the process, this becomes a teachable moment for Peter. And we say, listen, you took that from him. That was not yours to give. It's nice that you wanted to give your friend something, but that was not yours to give. When the psalmist says here of God in verse 3, it says, He forgives your iniquity. He redeems your life. He, in verse 12, He removes our transgressions from us. Forgiveness is not mine to give me. Forgiveness is His to forgive. Forgiveness is His to extend to me. And it may be that you're lugging around some excess baggage. You came into this place feeling weighted down with guilt and just feeling terrible about the choices that you've been making and terrible with these lingering feelings, and you feel oppressed and weighted down and vexed by these out-of-bounds choices that you've made. And you've been trying to tell yourself, okay, just do better. Just straighten your back and just do better next time. We're all just kind of okay. You've got to forgive yourself. I'm telling you, you're going to keep bearing that weight. It's going to stay on your shoulders until you go to the right person. My sin, your sin, is not against ultimately me, though it certainly affects me. My sin is not ultimately against my spouse, though it may affect her, or my kids, or this church, though it affects all of these people. Your sin absolutely affects other people, but ultimately your sin is against God. And if you want to get rid of the guilt, you got to go to the right person. And I'm going to just tell you, you're not the right person. Your sin is against Him. Go to Him. And when we do that, keep in mind, we have the superscript above verse 1 of this psalm that says this is a psalm of David. We can't say that with certainty. These superscripts were added later. But likely this, or possibly, this is something that David wrote. Remember, David's got some baggage behind him, doesn't he? You remember the whole adultery thing? That's pretty bad. The murder thing, that's really bad. Within his family, just terrible things were happening. All of these regrettable decisions, and tons of things that you would say, man, David should feel terrible about. But he's saying what? Bless the Lord, O my soul, all that is within me. Bless His holy name, because He forgives my iniquities. He says in verse 12, as far as the east is from the west, He's removed my transgression from me. David, this guy that has all that stuff potentially, this same guy is writing about how liberated he feels. Why? Because he went to the right person. Maybe you're here today, or maybe you're watching and you're feeling weighed down. And it's not by an extra set of contacts. It's not by a few extra pounds, but it's because of choices, actions that you have done. If you want that guilt to go away, you got to go to the right person. But as you do that, after you have done that, this is the second thing you need to do. And maybe you say, well, Michael, I already did that. I've confessed that to God, but I still kind of feel bad. Second thing you need to do is this: operate as a liberated person. Operate as a liberated person. The psalmist says, all kinds of amazing things about God in this passage, in this text, in this psalm, and about how he deals with us. In verse 8, he says that God is compassionate and gracious toward us, and he is. It's wonderful that God doesn't have a hair trigger with us. He's slow to anger. He abounds in faithful love. Then verse 9 says of God that he will not always accuse us or be angry forever. If you're just passing quickly through that, if you're just quickly perusing this, you may think, okay, well, that's saying that when I have transgressed, when I have sinned, when I have disobeyed God, that there is anger that he feels and he accuses me of doing wrong, but he's not going to do so forever. And so maybe what it is that God needs is a little bit of time to cool off. Because we're like that, correct? And maybe it is with your kids, or maybe it is with an employee, or with a coworker, or with a boss, whatever it is, that you feel these things and they just kind of go away over time. And maybe that's what the psalmist is saying, that God just kind of needs a little bit of time to chill out. God, he needs a little bit of time to relax, and then after some time has passed, then he's not going to be angry, and then he's not going to be accusing us. That's not what he is saying. Pay attention to the words that he intentionally uses. He uses anger and accuse. When I have sinned, when you have sinned, God is not indifferent to it. He never has been, and he never will be. And God doesn't think it's a little deal. He thinks it's entirely consequential. And in fact, the emotion that he feels with response to my sin is anger. Consistently we see that's how God feels about my disobedience. It's exactly how as a parent you feel when your children disobey you. You feel anger over that. And by virtue of the fact that he is angry over my sin, I stand as the accused. I stand as one who has violated these standards, who has violated these rules, who has crossed that line. But he says God's not going to feel about that way me forever. What's going to change? Is it just that enough time passes and he kind of chills out? No, it has everything to do with what we talked about just a moment ago, that you go to the right person, that when you go to him with your iniquity, you go to him with your sin, you go to him with your transgression and say, Lord, this is what I have done. That standard, that line that you erected, I crossed that and I did that, and I am asking for your forgiveness. I am confessing this to you. And at that point, you know what God does? The psalmist says that he does something wonderful. He says that he, in verse 12, removes our transgressions from us. But it's not simply that he says that he removes them. He says that he removes them as far as east is from the west. Now, how far is east from west? It's like infinitely far away. It's not a measurable distance. That's essentially God saying, listen, I am, my little lovely chapstick here, God is not saying, I'm going to take your sin and I'm going to forgive it, but I'm going to set it over there so I'm just going to remember that. He doesn't do that. He says that he takes it and he removes it, casts it as far as east is from west. That says it's gone. That says it's not in proximity. That says it's not within earshot. That's beyond eyesight. It's infinitely gone as far as east is from west. That's what he does to my sin. When I have gone to him, when I've gone to the right person, he forgives and he cleanses me, and he removes this as far as east is from west. Now, at the outset, we talked about guilt and how it makes us feel. And the feeling we put in the negative category. I don't like how it feels. You don't like how it feels. It's unpleasant. Many times we would describe it as feeling vexed or weighed down. And so if you have been weighed down and that weight is removed, how do you feel? You feel liberated. You feel freed. You feel unencumbered. This past week, Guilford County schools started back, and at this point, I guess everybody that's going to be going to school has started class, and I guess it depends on the age that you are and what school you have or what teachers that you've got. But I noticed the other day when Andrew was getting ready to leave to go to school, he's got this this backpack, and I don't think it would hold a nickel extra. I mean, it was filled to the gills. It's full of books and notebooks and all this stuff. And I mean, like the seams on this look like my pants. They were just screaming for mercy. And and so Andrew gets this backpack on, and maybe you've seen kids out at the bus stop, or maybe your kids or your grandkids. They get this on, and as he has this on, he's leaning a little bit forward. Why? Because this backpack weighs 962 pounds. All right, so he's going to school like this. But he's doing so because there's this massive weight that's on him. And if you were to see him with that weight on his back, you would say, well, that makes sense. I mean, that backpack is full. All this heavy stuff is on it. It makes sense to operate like this when you've got that weight on you. If, however, you were to pass Andrew this morning at church and he's walking around like this, you would say, who's he imitating? But you'd want to know that there's a problem, wouldn't you? Something's not right. And if Andrew said, well, when you said, hey, what's the matter? Why are you leaning over like that? Well, because my book bag is so heavy. What would you say to him? You're not wearing a book bag? You don't have a backpack on. If you don't have a backpack on, you know what you should do? Don't act like you've got a backpack on. This is what God promises. When I go to Him, when I go to the right person, He takes my transgression, my sin, my iniquity, and He removes it. And how far does He put it away? As far as east is from west. He takes that weight off of me. I've been weighed down. I have been vexed. The backpack has been removed. It has been taken off my shoulders. You see the application. Why do I keep walking around like this? Maybe you thought that's how I ought to operate. I thought I needed to have a pair of contacts in. I didn't realize I didn't need that. Maybe you thought this is how you need to operate. I'm telling you, you don't. And God doesn't want you to operate in that way. Why? Because you are a miserable follower of Christ at that point. When you're weighed down with guilt and vexed over that which has been forgiven, that which has been confessed, and you still feel miserable, how effective are you in God's service? Not at all. How contagious is your faith? Not at all. But how contagious is your faith when you realize that you have sinned against the one that made heaven and earth, sinned against the one that created you with plan, purpose, and intentionality, who desires things that are for your ultimate good, and you still waved your fist at Him and decided, I'm going to do my own thing, and yet He forgives you and takes that wrongdoing from you and doesn't bring it up anymore, removes it from you. How do you feel? You feel like somebody that wants to shout. You feel like somebody that's got some positive news. You feel like someone who can say this, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, give Him praise. Why? Because He's done something great for me. This is available. This is possible. You can experience this. The question is, very simply, have you? Will you bow your heads with me?